Hi, it's Pat here, and welcome to 28 and 28. You know, a number of years ago, on a cold winter day at the farm, we decided to film the horses' legs so that we could show people what's going on underneath them when they ride. I think it's really important to pay attention to this kind of thing, and I know someday I'm going to refilm this with a better camera, but I think it holds up pretty well, and I hope that you'll gain some insight from it. Let's start with the walk. First of all, here's my really fancy drawing of the walk. So you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's much more interesting to watch the horse do it. So there's Chloe, and she's showing us her walk steps. So let's slow it down a little bit. We'll look at Lottie. So you'll see the white hind leg comes off the ground, then the red front leg, followed by the red hind leg, followed by that front leg. Did you see that? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you can see, there's always 2 to 3 legs on the ground at any time, or I should say feet on the ground at any time. And this is a great gait to start a horse back from being laid off for a while. If a horse isn't very fit, it's a great gait to use because the horse doesn't jump around. He's not leaving the ground and landing again as he does in the trot, which we'll see in a minute. So this is a super gait to use always for warming up, letting the synovial fluid kind of get moving around in the horse's joints. But it's also great work for a horse that maybe isn't very fit or is just coming back to work. Okay, so we'll look at the trot. Again, we'll see another one of my fancy drawings of what the trot looks like. And now we'll look at the horse doing it. So the horse springs from one diagonal pair of legs, so that's the white leg, to the other diagonal pair of legs, which is the yellow legs, with a moment of suspension in between. And that means a moment where there's no feet on the ground at all. So I found a picture of a horse that's trying a little harder than Chloe in that picture so that you can get an idea what the moment of suspension looks like. So as you can imagine, the trot requires a little bit of a higher demand from the rider than the walk does. There's a lot more motion. I remember years ago reading that, I think it's Wilhelm Muessler who said that all problems with riding begins with the command trot on, which I thought was pretty funny. But at any rate, you can see that the horse is going to jostle, especially the beginner rider, around a lot more, especially if they're trying to do sitting trot, like staying with the movement of the horse while keeping their seat in the saddle. So most people will opt to do rising trot, especially in the beginning, especially with a young horse or when they're first starting out. Okay, we now move on to the canter. It's a 3-beated gait, and here's my beautiful sketch of what the sequence of legs looks like. I should mention that English is the only language that speaks of canter. And it traces back to the Pilgrims going to the Canterbury Cathedral, and it was originally called the Canterbury Pace and shortened to the word canter. In other languages, it would be like a slow gallop or a fast gallop. But for our purposes, we're going to use canter. Okay, so let's see if we can figure out what the legs are doing. So the one that we're going to be watching to begin with is that white hind leg, because that's where it's going to start. There we go. 3 feet off the ground. The next 2 that land are the yellow legs. And now finally the horse's entire body goes over top of her front leg. Did you see that? So it's outside hind, diagonal pair, inside 4. So this is the gait of flight, right? If you're watching a horse and something scares him, like really startles him, he's not going to trot away from something. He's going to canter or gallop away from it, or lope, if that's the word you prefer to use. But be that as it may, there's always an inherent tension in the canter, or at least I should say that there always can be, because it is the gait of flight. I mention that just because it's something to be aware of in your training and understand how the horse is, again, viewing the world, right? You're asking him to cover ground in a gait that he would use to run away from things, and so you just want to make sure that it's always nice and calm and you're aware of that. Of course, it should be noted that sometimes galloping or cantering is just a result of exuberance. It doesn't always have to involve fear. For example, with this horse, it's just a sign that he's feeling pretty good. Horses love to move, which is why it's so important for them to get a chance to do it at liberty. Okay, now we'll look at the gallop, remembering again that English is the only language that distinguishes between the slow gallop, which is the canter, and the fast gallop, which is what we're going to look at now. The sequence of legs, as you can see here, but it's not an even beat. Like it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. It's more 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we'll look at this guy. As you can see, he's carrying all his weight on the hind leg that's closest to us. And then he steps down with that white hind leg. It's kind of hard to catch all this because it happens so fast. And the next leg that lands is the white leg that's closest to us, the diagonal pair, almost on the ground at the same time, but not quite. And then finally, the horse lands with the leg that's closest to the rail, and his entire body crosses over, and then he springs through the air. And these guys, they cover about, well, a little bit more than 20, 25 feet of stride. Okay, let's look at the rein back, even though I don't like that expression because it implies we pull back with the reins. The way the horse goes backwards is of interest to us. A lot of people think the horse goes backwards the way he walks forward, but that's not actually true. A horse actually walks backwards in the same way that he trots, except there is no moment of suspension. So let's have Dex demonstrate that for us. So if you watch his red legs, they go back as a pair, and then his white legs go back as a pair. So it's exactly like trotting backwards, except there's no moment of suspension. So he's not springing from one pair of diagonal legs to the other pair of diagonal legs, but he is moving back in diagonal pairs. Okay, so that's it. Now you know what's going on underneath you when you ride. I really do recommend that you pay attention to this. Try to feel it. Maybe have someone on the ground who can tell you what's going on whilst you're feeling it, while you're sitting there. It really does make a difference. And eventually, as time goes on, it'll really give you an opportunity to really refine your communication with the horse because you're going to know where his legs are and whether his leg is available for the very next thing that you're asking him to do. I hope this helped. Remember to thank your horse and talk to you tomorrow.